All right, good evening, everyone. My name's Adam Bria. I'm the chair of the housing committee. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Hope that didn't sound good. 6:35 PM on Tuesday, October 1st. Do I go to roll call or do we do ground rules first? Sorry. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over some ground rules. We've probably all heard them a million times. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members. If you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. To raise your hand through Zoom, click the participant's icon and you will find the raise hand function there. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subjects on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. That's it. Is there another slide?
No, that's it.
Gonna do roll?
Yeah, committee members, I'm not calling your name, please answer present for the roll call. Stephanie Arroyo,
Present.
Adem Bria,
President.
Jocelyn Cruz. David Giordano. John Green. Christina Johnson. Wilfredo Lopez.
Here.
Jessica Morris. Beverly Pavon,
Present.
Claudia Perez,
Present.
Cynthia Ramos,
Present.
Don Sanders. Loretta So,
Present.
Candy Vasquez. Jason Wu.
Present.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So with that being said, we will move to adopting this month's agenda unless I see any objections.
The date. Supposed to be October 3rd.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
Good catch.
okay,
Come on, go get this week.
I say fire.
damn it, you're making me look bad. All right, well, with the correction to changing the date from September 3rd to October 1st, we will adopt the agenda then. And then the minutes were sent out. I did do them in time, I believe. So unless there's any objections, we will adopt the minutes from last month's meeting. All right, seeing no objections, and the minutes from last month's meeting are adopted. Announcements or informational updates. No, I mean, there's some things, but I guess that would be more like new business or goals discussion. We can get into that. So with that said, then we will move to our presentations and discussions. So the first one is A, committee discussion regarding Ascendant Neighborhood Developments, existing properties in East Harlem. All right, so I'm just gonna start us off. I think I touched on this and then I kind of ran with it quickly because whoever was at full board saw that we had the public hearing. If you're public members, you weren't there, but you're probably aware. They're doing the land use item for the Beacon on First Avenue and 120th Street. And Ascendant is one of the partners. The other one is the community builders. The reason that we're not really doing a deep dive on the community builders is they don't have any properties in our community. So we could have investigated into other things, but it just felt more appropriate. Ascendant has 26 properties in this community. They weren't extended an invite. I just want everyone to know they were asked to be here. They told me about a week or so ago. They've been responding, but they just said they couldn't be here. I think if you were at full board, you heard me express my displeasure for that. And I think moving forward, we will hold people to that. I mean, there wasn't much I could do. I had just become chair and I had extended an invite. I couldn't get too ridiculous, but I did email them some questions. I would have asked everybody else for their feedback, but it was kind of like quick, and there is that opportunity still. So it wasn't like that, if you read the email, we have a printout here. I asked just 4 really basic questions. I think the most pressing concerning ones based off the discussion we're about to have, or anything you think of later. If you have any questions for them that you want answered, email them to me and I will send them directly. And I will even include you guys on those emails. I say that it is pressing to an extent. If you think it's a good project, I think we can all agree that Beacon's a good thing. That's not what we're here to do. We're not here to derail it. We're here to say, you want this new thing, you want this new shiny toy, then what are you gonna do about the things you have here already, right? HPD did express at full board that part of the process when they award these projects is that all their other properties would have to be cleared of all their violations. My issue with that is what happens after that, right? So you clear everything, you get the building, now you're done. What happens 3 years after that? Are we back to square one? I know these are older buildings. I know that they are a non-for-profit, so maybe they don't have the deepest pockets, maybe they do, I don't know their financial. All I know is that if you wanna run properties in this neighborhood, you should run them up to a certain standard, right, regardless, and if you can't, then why are you looking to do other properties, right? I mean, that's a fair question, okay? I could read the questions if you guys want me to and the answers, or you have them in front of you. How does everybody feel about that? You could read them yourselves? I mean, basically, we can sum them up and then we can go to what anybody else wants. I just said, could you explain the reason for the extremely large number of complaints over the past 2 years? We were talking about this right before the meeting started. They're saying that a lot of them come from non-payment of rent, and then legal aid encourages residents to contact Department of Housing and provide a list of complaints related to, so blah, blah, blah. So I'm not here to decide whether these answers are true or not. What I don't like about this answer is it's not taking any accountability in my eyes, right? There's a lot of complaints. And I'm gonna pass it off now, this will be talking point one, but there's 2,600 complaints. Even if 1,000 of these are that, or even if half of these are that, it can't be all of them. So what's your answer to all the other ones, right? So that's, I think, a follow-up question is, are you just gonna sit here and tell me that this is all the complaints you get? With that said, I know you look like, or maybe you're just reacting because you don't like it.
I mean, I agree, they're
Yeah.
not taking accountability.
Yeah.
The violations are placed if HPD sends an inspector.
These are complaints before they become violations.
Okay.
But I agree with you because they do have 650 violations. So a lot of these complaints are turning into violations. That's.
Mhm.
So I think that at least the follow-up to this is, all these complaints aren't this, right? If you want to make that assertion, I think you need to identify a proportion of what that is, and then what are the other ones about and what's being done about those, right? I think this is a little bit of it's an easy out. If we're gonna accept this answer, we should never have asked the question in the first place, in my opinion. Stephanie?
So 650 violations throughout all their developments here in East Harlem.
Yeah, so they have, just to break it down, I don't know, I think it was 26 properties roughly, they have 628 units. I put all this data together, full disclosure, there could have been errors, but when I sent it to them, I said, here's the data, tell me if anything's wrong. And they didn't, so then I'm gonna accept this as a matter of record then, right? I mean, unless someone says
I
otherwise.
was under the impression that they only had like, elderly or senior citizen buildings, but it looks like they have buildings. all
You just
over.
go on their website.
Yeah, I'm looking at their website now.
Portfolio, that's
Yeah.
how I did it, I just went one by one on HPD and I just collected the data. Okay, so that's one, I mean, there definitely is follow-up there. Again, if you can't think of your questions right now, you can send them to me, I just say, but
The only thing I would say to this is if they're claiming that they have such high number of withholding,
rent,
holdover cases, then I wanna see the data. I mean, if you have 650 units and more than half of them are in holdover, okay, I can understand the argument. But I don't think it's that high.
right, so you wanna see it if it is.
Yeah, like show, like, don't just say it, tell us, show us. If it's, if it's a few dozen, then that's not enough.
Yeah, to explain the number of complaints,
Can you
right?
pass the letter?
Oh, letter.
I'm for anything that's asking for more data. I mean, that's one of the goals of this committee is to be data driven. So I like that question, which is not only that, but provide hard data on this.
Yeah, and they're 1.3 million in total revenue last year, according to their 90, so then they don't have deep pockets, but.
If they don't, yeah,
They have a lot of assets under management, which makes sense.
right, but they're not cash rich.
Cash rich, yeah.
Okay,
And I have at least seven more developments. That's in the pipeline for them right now.
and they have, I know at least a few that are not, and I know they had some stuff in West Harlem, not much. I think 99% of what they have is, but yeah, again, like I said before, and I agree with you, is if you're not cash rich and you're gonna use that as an excuse for why are, and then you're extending out into more and more and more, right? So that's concerning to me too. I think it's just concerning to the discrepancy of you're gonna have this beautiful new building that you're managing and owning and all these nice apartments, and these are in disrepair, disarray, and like Will said, if it's really an example of a bunch of people just not wanting to pay their rent and being told by their lawyers to make complaints to, keep them not, then fine, then show us the data, right? I mean, I'm not gonna call anyone a liar, but show the data and we'll go from there. So that's a great question. I think That, the number two was, can you, a large number of open violations, and then that's the refusing access, right? Again, it's a lack of accountability, right? It's just easy to say, and that's a little bit harder. You know, that's almost like you're gonna have to knock on doors and ask, right? But my thing is, if the data for one can't come in correctly, it tells me two is probably not correct either, right? They seem to go hand in hand a little bit. Anything else on number two, other than we're gonna kind of use the questions we can ask from number one to get data, hopefully that will tell us if one is really an outrageous claim, then two is probably not too accurate either, right? And if they do provide a bunch of data that proves one is correctly, I could almost take them a little bit at their word on number two. That's how I'm feeling, unless somebody has a better suggestion of figuring out whether people are, you know, opening their doors there or not.
I mean,
650 violations.
but 51 of them are open. Right, is that,
56 complaints, so I think what happens is a complaint gets filed, an inspector comes out, the complaint can be closed, there could either be not, it wasn't a real complaint, whatever. Here's my issue. There's 651 violations. That means 651 complaints. Had an inspector from HPD come out there and verify that that was in fact a violation, right? So that wasn't some lawyer told you to say this, because then what is the inspector in on it too? No, the inspector saw a violation. So I think what happened was there were 2,600 of these. A lot of them got closed out. Some are still in that process of being closed or becoming a violation, and then 600 and something turn into violations. That's what I think these numbers are.
Couldn't there be some repetitiveness to this too, where they're saying that they're fixing them, closing out the tickets, and then again, you're waiting a couple of months, and then the same problem is coming back up again?
Totally
That's
possible.
something we don't, you know.
We can go to comb through the data, you're right, I mean, you could, to comb through the data at that level would require some type of serious software that we don't have, or someone who, you know, would do this full time, so I mean, I hear you, I think the onus is on them, right? So when we say there's 650 violations, and that's a lot, if they wanna come in and prove their reasons why this number's high, that's their burden. I don't think it should be our burden to say, are these reopen or this, I'm just looking at it as a holistic number. You have 628 apartments in the community, you have more than one violation per apartment. Now, one apartment might have 10, one might have 2, one might have none, but the average is not good. The number of complaints in 2 years is not good. If you look at the complaints, it's 4 complaints per apartment every 2 years. So 2 complaints per apartment per year. That's how it breaks down.
So with 26 buildings, are we seeing more complaints in certain?
It's on your sheet. They're listed out. Some are small. You have to also remember, some are a lot more units than others. They have a pretty healthy mix of big and small. But yeah, I break them down individually. Beverly, Loretta, then Will.
I just wanted to, let you know about the, who owns what. On their, they do a profile of all the properties that they have, and on it also talks about HPD complaints, over the last 3 years. And it also have the top complaints and what violations is open on these properties if you use this. I'm trying to see if they had a total for the open violations. You said it was
I
100.
had for 2 years, I had it at 651.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Okay, for some reason,
yeah.
it doesn't have a
Yes.
total at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
but it has, there's 23 buildings thus far on here.
Right.
And the violations and evictions and everything on here, so this is a great website to use, get some data on them and.
I wish you had told me about it before I did this.
Yeah, and this is for any building, any property you find out. What I like about it mostly is because it has the portfolio, so it tells you all the buildings that owner has.
That's a huge point, that's
Yeah,
great.
so this could be very.
Yeah. Please share the link with everybody,
Yes.
because, well, we'll get to that later. That'll be useful in something we talk about a little bit later. Loretta, then Will.
No, I didn't have.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, I thought your hand, sorry. All right, well,
What I was gonna say is, in terms of looking at data, I'm happy to dig into the class Cs, because those are the most vicious ones. And do maybe, you know, cursory analysis of how many are, to Cece's point, how many have been, ongoing, closed, reopened versus how many are like
Like just.
discrete new ones.
Yeah.
And I can send an email to the board. I'm only gonna commit to the class Cs, the 179, because.
No, that's fine.
Those are the most,
The most
Yeah, the
urgent,
most serious,
yeah,
so.
hazardous, yeah.
And class C are the open.
No, it's, A is the least severe violation you could have. It could be something like your oven door isn't closing correctly. B is, don't hold me to it, that would be a medium level violation. C is immediately hazardous, like, and I'm not joking, my tub is falling through the floor, or I have, rodents or roaches. Any pest related stuff is considered immediately hazardous, I think, because of diseases and things like that that can spread. If it's putting your immediate health or well-being in the future, in danger, it is a C violation, usually. And again, so everyone understands, these are HPD violations. So Will had asked earlier about violations on the actual properties themselves, like the facade and all that, with all these local laws coming out. That would be DOB violations. I didn't dig into those just because the concern more for this conversation was actual tenant quality of life, but that is something else. We're gonna get to that later. We're gonna talk about the goals we had set and maybe people saying what they're most interested in as we tackle them. We're gonna break off into little teams when we're not together for the month, so we'll get to that. But then three was like more about going forward. Where's the sending strategy and correcting the existing violations and open complaints, and what is the timeline for that? And they said that typically complaints are resolved before they escalate into violations. All existing violations are currently being rectified through certification. HDPD's dismissal process will remove any violations that have passed their certification date. Don't hold me to this. I can say that I have to double check on that. I don't know if that's 100% true, because some of them were very newly issued violations. They were issued in September. So I don't think they would have hit certification, timing, whether it was past that date or, before it was too soon. They had just been issued, they were pending. As I said earlier, and if anyone missed it, HPD said at full board that they will have to have a clean slate, right? And this is why I guess I asked this next question, because what is the sending strategy to ensure that there are a lot less complaints and violations moving forward? And then again, my concern is when you're not asking the board and city council and HPD for something and no one's paying attention, we'll be paying attention, but what are you doing then, right? How are you making sure that that stays that way? You can't expect there to be no violations, but how do you turn 600 violations into 60, right? And how do you turn 2,600 complaints into a couple of hundred, right? Within reasonably, with a strategy for that. You can read their answer. I guess this will be something we'll have to have more talks with them about. I would just say if they had all the answers already, they might not already been in this situation, but we can, I don't know if there's any follow-up questions to any of this based on, I just asked these four because I didn't want to bombard them. And I figured we'd be following up with more questions, so I wanted to see what everybody's feeling was. Again, we will be voting on this at full board in October. Shouldn't impact your feelings on the project, though, I will say that. Beverly?
I want to let you know that I'm thinking that the state just did, new legislative laws on rights of repairs. And they have a time period on when they're supposed to be doing it based on the, violation type. So that's something that, maybe passed in, maybe in 2002 or maybe 2003. So that's something that we can use to, help push repairs a little faster, although it's kind of hard as a management company to make repairs when tenants don't let you in.
That's true. You have to see both. I think
Yeah.
the important thing is not looking at the landlords or property owners, whoever, as quote unquote, like the bad guy, or they're
Right.
coming in, they must be wrong, there are violations here. It's looking at the answers, looking at that. What I will say is they seem to be open. They seem to be, they answered me when they said they would. Again, they couldn't be here. I have the feeling, though, that they will be willing to come moving forward. I don't love the first two answers, but I'm not gonna, go, oh my God, it's important. Stepping out, calling a second. It's important to just follow up on that. But The key here is to use one example to build this out with everybody else, right? If we can show we can have ongoing dialogues and get things done, it'll make this a more inviting place, because, you know, we're gonna wanna call in people who are landlords here who aren't going for new, action, land use items and stuff, and they can just tell us no. There is nothing that will make, you know, if, let's just use another one, L&M. L&M isn't looking for something from HPD or whatever, and we're looking at the property, and we're like, oh, there's some problems here. They don't have to, they don't have to come, but if they say, oh, you know what, there's a good dialogue there. They're reasonable, you know, it'll look good for us to come and do this, they'll be more inclined to. So we gotta strike that balance of being, you know, representing our community, being tough, but being fair and being, you know, open to listening. So Stephanie, did you, and then Jason?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So two things. I don't know if that's information that they're willing to share with us, but I really would like to know like how many of their units are Section 8.
Okay.
Only because, as we all know, Section 8 has a mandate that like the permits units have to be in a certain standard. And if those standards aren't there, they're not paying, right? And I'd also like to understand, and I don't think they'll share with us like obviously how many residents are not paying rent, but it is a thing that unfortunately after COVID, people are still trying to catch up on rent and are behind on rent. And a lot of people are behind on housing court because some people have the like ability or the right to have attorneys, and unfortunately, there are not enough attorneys, right? So to speak on behalf of the landlords, not that I like to do that all the time, but you know, it is hard for you to do repairs when you don't get the funding. And it's hard for tenants to get the assistance when things aren't going through in housing court, because you're not gonna get an HRA assistance until you have some sort of proof that you are in immediate need. You're not in immediate need until you're in housing court. So there's a whole slew of things that stop people from getting their rent paid. I don't know if that's something that we as a board can do, but it would be beneficial to us to like speak to the landlords and say, hey, if the issue is that maybe these tenants don't have the access or don't have the ability or don't know that there are these resources there for them, like, is there something like maybe an open forum that we can do where we bring in HPD, where we bring in HRA, where they explain the process and tell them this is how you can get the benefits and the resources you need. So that may be something that we can think of as a goal, as a housing community goal.
Jason and Will.
I mean, at the end of the day, like, clearing the violations, ensuring that there's proper. Housing is the landlord's responsibility, and so all of this other stuff, in terms of their responses to our questions. These are kind of canned answers that landlords always give, like, tenants don't pay rent, these are not real conditions, they don't give access, like, this is like the script. And they could have answered in a way that was more empathetic to their tenants, they could have taken more accountability. But that's fine, I don't know that it matters that much in what they actually say, because they can say anything they want, and that doesn't mean it's true. Is there a possibility where we could potentially like tour some of their buildings and maybe like invite HPD or like HPD inspectors? That's something we could request of HPD and with the consent of the landlord.
I mean, I know when I asked, it's a good point you brought up. I think twofold, to the first thing, I know you're right, they could say anything they want and then.
Yeah, they could have given better.
What I like though is having it in writing,
Yeah.
whether it's a bad answer or a good answer.
Yeah.
And then say, well, we have it, right? Now, this isn't binding, but it's a record, it's a paper trail. So, you know, you gave these answers, then you went back, you fixed them, you gave us better answers, but then you didn't do it, right? So there's a track record. To the thing about that, I like the walkthroughs. I think that HPD, when I asked the questions there, I actually said to them, oh, what do you do about violation? And they came and said, we'd like be happy to come. But I think like we can have them come, but as opposed, I said I was like presentation adverse, but I'm not adverse if it has to do with what we're talking about. And then if it can lead into something interactive, which is touring the properties, because it's also hard to like sit here and look at these numbers and always get an accurate picture of how someone's actually living, right? We can go there and be like, it could go one or two ways, right? It could go three ways. It could be like, oh, this is exactly what I thought. Oh, this isn't that bad. Oh my God, this is a whole lot worse than I thought, right? And until we really walk it through, we won't know. So I like that. I will definitely work on that this month. What I will say is I can't take notes and run a meeting. I'm not capable of that. So if you have questions, just email them to me. And I'll keep, and whatever I do remember, I do try to rewatch the meeting when I do the minutes. But I'm gonna lie if I say I really watched the whole thing. All right, so, Will,
To Stephanie's point, in terms of, and I think I lost track of my thought there for a second, so you're gonna have to bear with me. Oh God, what were we talking about a second ago? It's been a long day for me, I'm sorry.
Section 8, and if they weren't, getting the apartments fixed, yeah.
So, given the fact that according to their 990s, they're not very cash rich,
Right.
is a consideration that we should look at in terms of improving the beacon, their capacity to manage this entire portfolio. On top of, how many units in the beacon again?
Oh, it's over.
It's a massive, yeah, it's a massive,
Yeah, it's like at least half of their total units already.
like,
It's over 300.
I get it, they're probably mortgaged to the hilt, like every other
And they have a
nonprofit
partner
developer.
there. I don't know what they're, but you're right, it's a good
Yeah,
question.
yeah, so, I mean, I think that's something that we should probably talk, or you should probably talk with land use, or whoever is managing that part of the ULURP. That should be a consideration, because if they're struggling to manage these units,
Well, what are they gonna do about those?
yeah, and 1.3 million in revenue for a nonprofit with
It's
26.
not good.
I work for a nonprofit that owns 24 properties. We're $120 million.
I was gonna say, if you own 24 properties, you should have at least 50 million and up
In
in
the bank, yeah.
the bank, 100%.
And again, maybe they have some other private financing that's reported differently, maybe on a different schedule. I haven't really done a deep dive. I will.
It's a good question,
But I
period.
think we should question that. That is a capacity issue.
See, and I would say the onus isn't on us to always pull the data, right? You have a great question. The data might be out there, let them bring it to us too, you know what I mean? And if they don't, then it isn't there, but we can do our homework too, but like, you know, they have to be active in meeting us there, but I agree with you, because this is gonna be a nice new building. But what happens 10 years down the road when repairs start to happen?
And we're seeing that now with some buildings that were built
I like that.
3 or 4 years ago alone. I lived in one of those buildings that 4 years into it, it's repair.
And things look like they're built better than they are a lot of the times, right? It looks so nice and you're like, the quality wasn't there. Yeah.
It depends on the builder, but also depends on the maintenance, you know how that goes, the maintenance is, and part of the reason why some of our older building stocks are up is because they were well maintained for the first 50 years of their existence. But yeah, so.
I like that. Very good question. Thank you, Jessica.
Pardon me, Dean,
It's okay.
great set of data. 2 points. Is, sometimes having violations open is beneficial for tenants in court. And so the goal to get everything resolved, while ideally that's a clean slate, it may also harm some people in the process. Just as we're kind of doing our due diligence, keep in mind that there, and I also say that because I think HPD is a partner in this process, that's a, if we're looking at one developer with one portfolio in our district, we come up with that going on citywide, and how they're managing that or not. So whistleblowing is good until you're dealing with what you found. And then I'll say at Bound Land Use, since I started on the board some number of years ago, and generally, I think, Ascendant is well-intentioned, and that's been acknowledged in our favor of what they bring to the table, producing lots of housing. At the same time, I do, and I don't know when it may have been said, but I have brought the capacity issue to the table, just saying, you got a lot on your plate, how are you gonna do that? So I think the friendly question has been asked, and sort of posed, and it's not been received as a problem, though it's been acknowledged that, yeah, we got a lot going on. So I think, the tone we take as a board in approaching what is a well-intentioned
effort to deliver lots of housing to a community that wants it. That's something we should really be strategic about, ideally, especially if, with someone like, defendant, where there's a set of issues, but there's also challenges, not to, Jason sort of can't answer is absolutely. What else to say is, so. Those are the thoughts, how you go about it. Adam, I think the initiative is incredible to be having this conversation because it's a model for how to look at other portfolios that are also existing here, so.
Thank you. No, and I agree. I think before you came in, I was saying like touching on that tone, right? Like, and that was a good point about how open violations could closing them all, right? Like HPD closing them all, then says everything's in good, good repair, and then these tenants might have issues where they needed that open for something that was protecting them or whatever. So it's a juggling act. I think sitting on land use, I know Jessica, Beverly, you sit there with me and Candy. I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, and this isn't an indictment on land use, but I don't really recall us getting any housing data from this committee to tell us what these developers were doing beforehand, right? Like, so
Oh,
we used, well, right, I'm talking about like, okay, well, I don't even know who that is. So I've been here, I used to vice chair, like, we never got that feedback. And I even told Jason on land use, I said, look, like, we'll collect data, we'll give you a recommendation. And I agree, it's a great project. That's the problem, right? And I mean, Angel sat there and talked. I'm not looking to be like, first of all, here's the other thing, like if Ascendant, let's just say we found we did, but let's just say we did. Telling me somebody else wouldn't step up and want to do this, you know what I mean? So that's the thing, right? The project is maybe indispensable to the community. Who's doing the project isn't, right? But, and I'm not bad mouthing, I say, look, they've been responsive. I think Jason hit the nail on the head with this is like scripted legal jargon, and it's kind of like, let's hope you take this and say, oh, you know what, you asked the questions, we checked the box, right? That's not happening, all right? But that doesn't mean we're, grabbing our pitchforks either, right? We're just gonna operate in that nice place in the middle, all right?
I would just also say, in furthering that point, even if we say, okay, you give us the data, I'm not fully, that would be accurate. That, right, again, you can manipulate data and apply it to a certain way, right? So I think it's also like, like what we're saying, it's our due diligence also to say, okay, you gave us this. Now, is this accurate?
Well, and that's a great point. I think some of it'll be internal data, right? Which will be hard, right? Something like this, and that's why I said to them, tell me if it's wrong, and they didn't, which is like, if there's any data that's pulled where we could have access to it, we'll be like, well, where'd you get that? And we can always, it's like easier to cross-reference something than it is to always compile it from scratch. So, but I like that, because I agree with you, Will.
To that point, where did you get the litigation data?
HPD.
HPD?
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at it over again, and I'm like, there's only 10 pending cases.
There are a lot of old cases.
Yeah.
I thought about adding in all the cases that have been closed. There are a lot more. So this isn't, there have been cases.
I get that,
don't
but
know about what.
if they're saying that they're still struggling to get people to pay, then I would think that they would have.
Oh, yeah, I actually said, I'm sorry, you're on the same page. I said that earlier. I think it was just went under the radar.
Yeah.
I said that I would have thought there would be a lot more litigation if these violations were tactics for litigation, right? Meaning the lawyer's like, go get 10 violations, don't pay your rent, let's keep this going.
And-
That's not what it looks
And
like.
if Jason, if you could confirm this, when it says judgment outstanding, that's a judgment against a tenant, or is that a judgment against? I mean, it's hard to tell, right? When it just says judgment outstanding.
Could it be either or?
That's from HPD, no?
It sounds like it's a.
I feel like it's against the land
Landlord, yeah, if it's HPD, it would be the landlord.
or the tenant.
I mean, unless there's overcharge.
It wasn't
Yeah.
specific on the, like, some of the data, you couldn't really
Yeah.
get more info. The litigation stuff seemed very, maybe there's a, like a, you can't release certain things, so that was private. The complaints, you could go through all 2,600 and find out exactly what they were about,
Yeah.
but, Beverly, they
In
can
regards to litigation, you pull up the address, you can go on New York State Housing Court
Mhm.
and put in that address, and they'll tell you what the case is and all the details of that case.
Okay,
Not an HPD case though, not, it is, no, because HPD gets processed through HPD,
Right.
it wouldn't be
It's
processed
the
through the
agency
court.
case, yeah.
It's only once it goes through the court.
Housing court, yeah.
All through housing, only through
Yeah.
housing.
that's the problem, like, the thing like with NYCHA, right, is like, there is nowhere where you can go and
Yep.
get a data like this. They are not subject, that they have their own thing. You can't go on type of NYCHA property and go, how many violations are there, right?
Well,
That's
now
some,
they have open
Well,
transparency, so you can check on their website.
but it's not
But
easy
it's not as
like this. This, you literally stick the address in and it's boom, you
No,
know?
no, with NYCHA, it's like that
You
now.
can do that
Yeah,
now?
but it's not as accurate. I don't think they up to date. I think it's
They
like a
don't
year late.
update it.
Yeah.
as often
Well, then
as-
that's the, again, I mean, the data's only as good as what it, but that, I
Garbage
didn't
in,
know
garbage
that,
out.
okay. Well, listen, we're gonna get to that in the goals, cause we're gonna have people who have passions for certain things, I'm gonna like stick you on those things. But any links you have, send them to me, I sometimes take the like longest way to get there.
Yeah, can we throw
Candy?
links on
What?
like,
I
in the
know,
drive, so.
Yeah,
is this thing for.
maybe we'll have like a
Netflix?
link page, sorry, we'll have a page with
Just
links,
fix-
what?
You put that in there and it gives you everything, because I was just.
Yeah, we're, Well, I think what we'll do is we'll have a resource page with
Yeah.
all the links to everything, and we can keep that as a working document, so.
Just Fix, I mean, who owns what is a drop down menu of Just Fix, cause
Yeah.
Just Fix started about 10 years ago. And basically they started because of the ticket system with NYCHA, but it's grown so massively since then that they take all the data. So I'm very interested to go home and start looking.
Yeah,
to see
I
the
get
data
an
we can
email.
pull from
All
there.
right,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
sign up for it, that's-
It's
Yeah, I
called
got
Just
it.
Fix.
okay,
Yeah.
so we're gonna, I like-
Kind of
I keep saying we'll get to that, but we will, there's something to talk about with this, Jessica?
I just also want to bring up that, in addition to, Ascendant's portfolio, of new and old buildings, they're also involved in, the NYCHA portfolio
Are they rad?
projects. They're pretty heavily involved, so that.
Yeah, they started with
something-
us.
So I'll think,
Yeah, so it's not here at all and, not on the new. Balance sheet, but further, so free, then.
We'll cover that, I like that, because, if we have more people doing this, it'll be effective for us,
definitely use, I think it's definitely great to use the Just for Fix website, but I will say that when you go and you argue this back with the agencies, they're gonna say that's not. That's third party information and we don't know where those verifications are. NYCHA does have a NYCHA metrics website where they have their actual.
so pull it
information.
from there and pull it from
And
HPD.
then, yeah,
Open data.
We can use, I think there's a value to all this, I think. So we talked about identifying what's worth looking into, right? So Just Fix It, or who's your
Just
land,
Fix.
just whatever, yeah, just whatever. Who owns what,
Yeah.
like, that can be a kind of a macro look, right? Like, this is worth looking
Yeah.
into more, and then. I agree with you, because the same way we're like, well, we don't trust that data, maybe,
Mhm.
they're gonna turn around and say, well, that's not sourced from the, correctly, so, okay. What I'll ask is, I'd like everyone's questions, if you could have them to me by the end of this week for two reasons. I'd like to bring these things up at land use, and then I'd also like to bring them up at executive. And, I mean, as always, you're all welcome to go on Zoom to both those meetings too, and make noise there as well, but at least have your questions. And, I can bring up there, and it's a question, but at least we can bounce it around the room. Then when we get to full board, there's always time to discuss these things. I've been a proponent. Something like this comes up, big things, and we're sitting and listening to people make speeches for an hour and a half, and then we get to the busy part where we have to do work and we're all tired. I've been asking for years now to move that to the back of the meeting.
I agree with you.
And there's nothing that says it can't happen, and it doesn't, and I'm not talking about just now, it's been multiple chairs and administration, and I'm gonna start bringing that every month, just because we have a lot of we're having public hearings, no one's signing up to speak at them, we're having important discussions 3 hours into the night, and everybody's checked out. And so that's just unrelated, but I had to vent about that. Okay, well,
Just a point, so I just looked at their methodology, they're pulling from HB complaints, DOB, Pluto. eviction filings from the New York State Court, evictions data, tax exemption, ACRIS, the. So so they're scraping from all the same stuff.
And
that-
compiling, they're just
Yeah.
compiling it.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so if HPD Stephanie's point, if they say that the data is
Oh,
not,
I'm not saying HPD, but I say
Look-
NYCHA, because they don't have NYCHA
well,
on there.
NYCHA's not on, yeah. to
And
NYCHA's
NYCHA
point.
is the whole
But if
animal
HPD
that
says
will tell
that
you.
this isn't accurate, then their data that they're.
Well, no, let's all HPD and show us what's wrong, you know, I mean, if you're gonna say that, okay.
Yeah.
With that said, then, like I said, I'll ask you to email questions, and we'll go from there on that, all right, so. We're gonna go to B, which is just a continuation of the goals discussion that we had. Angel, I might need your assistance on this one, I might. I remember, we had a lot of goals, right? And I think I had said that we're gonna whittle them down to a few that we could start tackling and then go, because if we take 14 goals with 14 people, we're not really gonna get anywhere, right? So one goal was what we've been talking about right now, right, which is about compiling data. I picked Ascendant personally because I was like, oh, I'm on land use, there's this development coming, okay, let's look into these guys. There's gonna be a lot of time where there isn't somebody coming to land use, right? But that doesn't mean that we're not here to worry about the quality of life in existing buildings, right? So one of the things is gonna be, I would think at least one big property owner a month that we find out like 10, 15 buildings. I say we start, we've talked about also tackling smaller landlords and we can get there once we start getting our feet under us with the bigger ones. Finding 100 units or more to start that they own in the neighborhood and assessing them. And what I think I'd like to do is start breaking these off into smaller groups, right? So like 4 people would be tasked with, say, that group could either come and say, these are the properties we identified, these are the problems, there aren't problems, we can cross somebody off, be like, so-and-so has 300 apartments, they really have a great track record, and we can just keep an eye, but that's good. These guys have a problem, we should be reaching out to them, seeing if they could come sit down, we can talk to them. I heard a lot of enthusiasm as we talked about this in the data. I wanted to get a feel of like, on that first goal, right, which would just be, I would ideally think a monthly thing, like a 15-20 minute thing, unless we had some major thing that was taking up a whole meeting, this would be like a regularly scheduled thing. Who's interested in, one, helping to identify the properties we're looking at or the landlords we're looking at, and 2, start compiling this data. What we can then do, with that group, we can really come up with a template, right? So you're not just going off on your own. You know, I have this rough template, but we can build on that, get it more detailed, or whatever. Who's interested in possibly doing that? Loretta, what's your name?
Christina.
A quick question. Do we, Angel, you might know this, do we have like a top 10 list?
Internally, no.
No, so
Might
maybe
be something
that
that
we compile.
There's a few places that aggregate that kind of data. I forget the name of the organization. I was just looking for it right now before you interrupted my search.
I'm so sorry.
They call it the DAT portal. I want to say it's ANHD.
ANH,
And you can search properties and it has all the stuff you
Oh,
guys have
yeah.
been talking about.
Yeah.
And I imagine there's other places too, but that's the one I typically use. And that's a good place you start grabbing.
Okay.
I think from,
Yeah, and
this.
Yeah, it'd be good to know, like, with the top 10, you know.
like worst effect,
Not even worse, I'm sorry, I'm talking in terms
a
of.
big
total
number of
property,
apartments.
Yeah,
Oh,
like. total-
biggest landlord.
Biggest landlords in
Okay.
East Harlem.
We could
Yeah,
start.
nice.
Well, I mean, that's gonna be number 1, like, that's.
We're gonna have our own.
Night has to have its own.
NYCHA's the next topic, they have their own, they're special.
I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
we're
24
not
development.
lumping them in.
25, depending on how you count it, but,
They cut
Ah,
my
AM.
portfolio. Tremendous.
I'll tell you what, I'll take that on as my own, like to do, and then I'll share it with everybody, and you guys are welcome to say that they don't belong in, like, here's another one that has more, and we'll start with that, but Christina, Loretta have expressed interest, Will, because you said you'd look into the CB, I thought you
Yeah.
might be interested in
Yeah.
that. I figured, I was waiting for you, but.
Candy's also raising her hand.
Candy, interested? Okay, great. That's good. 5 is more than enough for
I have
that,
a
Stephanie.
question. Are we only gonna bring in just the bad ones?
No,
No, the top,
Okay.
the top 10.
no, because I like what you, I think I know, well, go where, did you have a reason you said?
Yeah,
I think I know. where
I
you're
just
going
think we
with it.
should bring in other landlords that are doing good jobs that they can explain to us, like, you know, good
Best
practices
Right.
that we can.
Then we can
other
use to
landlords.
give to the other one.
100%.
Success stories and then pick their brains. I
Yeah.
like that. That's a great.
Imagine we look at the top 10, and like one of the top 10 happens to have like no open valley, like that's.
Yeah,
Right there, that's who you wanna be
What's
looking
the
at.
secret, yeah, what's the secret sauce?
yeah.
Well, it's not only that, it's like, where there's like a reward too, like the board will acknowledge good work. So maybe this month you're here and it's not so good, and then maybe a year from now, you're the success
You change
story.
it around and how did you do
It's
that?
like the before and after pictures of all these people. Okay, all right, so we got,
Ask you.
Yeah.
But are you still also gonna follow up with the buildings that have done already the lottery and are still in the lottery process? The ones that we supported on the land use?
Yeah.
And then they've come over for the fresh or other projects that, you know, that we did the 421.
100%. I think this is gonna be, it's an enormous, I think, task to take on, right? I think one of the important things is, where do
We
you,
wanna take stock about what
Right.
housing that's affordable now.
right, and where do you
Especially the
start?
ones we supported
So
coming from the community.
you just volunteered. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break off into like smaller email chain groups, right? Where if you're on that group, we'll keep that, and then we can, because we don't need to bore the committee with every little thing we do. Once there's like a finished thing, we send it out, right? So one of the discussions we can have as that group is, who do we, not just the top 10, but like you just said, so-and-so came and they got these buildings and they made all these promises and this and that, and what's going on? Like, what are the conditions? You know, even like these beautiful common areas, right? Are they still beautiful 5 years later? Are they still being maintained? Is everybody getting access to
That's
them?
what I was
Right.
gonna say, some people don't
All
have
these things
access.
are 100%.
To kind of make it easy, it was Beverly, Candy, who else?
Christina and Loretta.
So may I just make a suggestion, Chair?
You gonna be a part two?
You're throwing these things out and signing this up. Why don't you put the top out there and then we'll assign. You know, like you go, who wants this? And then you say this and I'm all.
There are only 2 right now, so there's, you're right, and you could listen, if somebody wants to be on both, I'm okay with that too. I'm theoretically gonna be on both myself, so, you know, and the other one, all right, so let's stop with that, because I want us to take
We'll call it the landlord overview for now.
I like
We'll
that.
come up with a better name later.
you're the name guy, you throw us the name. The next one is NYCHA, right?
Property overview.
Okay, so NYCHA, now, when I say NYCHA, like, what am I talking about, right? So, I spoke to Xavier again today. And, you know, I know he had to bring his kids back to school and everything was busy. I told him, he already gave me dates, we're gonna do walkthroughs. He already told me that we'd be starting, I think he said with Johnson, don't hold me to these, but he gave me names of places he's gonna, even meetings to go to, whatever. I told him that there would be a subcommittee formed here. And that those walkthroughs would be, everybody's welcome to attend, but if you're on that committee, unless you, listen, we all have, life gets in the way, if you have something to do, you have something to do. But the expectation is that if you commit to this, you would be able to attend more often than you wouldn't. And if you can't, then we can find something that fits your schedule better. The idea here is, okay, so now there is a place to look at violations. We don't know how accurate that is. I think the other concern I have is, as opposed to HPD, right? HPD is reporting on other people's problems. This sounds like it's NYCHA reporting on NYCHA's problems, right? I mean, so more than ever, I think we touched on walking through these places. I think more importantly than even with these HPD problems is that we're walking through NYCHA and seeing if the data is even matching, you know, is what we're being told matching the realistic, well, the reality of what's going on, right? So walkthroughs, tenant meetings, I think once we start going out, we can get them to start coming here too, right? And I think that the goal here is just to improve the living conditions, and we've talked about it, understanding RAD, understanding PAC. We talked about how Ascendant is already involved in NYCHA projects in management. There's the trust component, which Angel said to me that he wasn't sure that was actually being implemented in this community
They
yet? Okay.
haven't, there aren't any developments that has gone under the trust. The first, development that will be going under the trust will be in Brooklyn, so that's like nowhere within our vicinity. That will be, I do believe it's Nostrand houses over there or something. I'm not too, yeah, so that would be first one to go under there. The difference between Rad Pact and Section 9, Section 9 is public housing. Really quickly, Rad Impact is not public housing. So that also was bringing me to where you were saying that's, but then like into the budget when you were like, okay, we want funding for the cameras and stuff. Now here comes, I'm telling you what's gonna happen, the in-house. Well, should it go to Rat Pact or should it go to Section 9? So you have to be specific in the ask when you're going towards nature, because they'll play that ball game all day.
So just not.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the trust is in Section 9, that would be switching over to
No,
Section 8.
that's it's another version, Rad Pack, Hope 6. That's all it is, Hope 6. I'm gonna be honest with you, it works with the smaller developments because you have, most people in those developments, they have set income, so it's not a fluctuating rent. Where you have the larger developments, like for instance, Christina's Lexington and I'm Wash, we're a consolidation. So basically what happens to her, they're gonna trickle down over to my side, so that's why we stay in contact. So, but my thing is what will work for her will not work for my 14. She had I have 14.
It's not a
You
one size
understand?
fits all.
And
Right,
they can't
exactly.
even decipher the funding for us, because our biggest complaint right now would be, and I don't mean to take up no more
No,
time.
go ahead, this is
But
good.
our biggest complaint would be, okay, you know what? The only thing we share, right, is the management. And you
staff.
can't even, and we share staff. So basically, if she has an emergency and we only have one worker that is skilled in that trade, they going there, but if I have an emergency,
Then
you
there's-
get what I mean?
Yeah.
So we've advocated, because we do share a management office and we share staff, we should have separate staff.
Yeah.
Specifically for each and whatever,
Right.
but I'm gonna bring it back. So when we say NYCHA is giving up its portfolio, right? So the best thing for them is to do, whoever can go into that Section 8 mold, they're gonna put them into that. So as we say, what's gonna happen to the others who do not fit within that Section 8 mold? What's gonna happen to them? You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, okay, maybe we can't afford market rate rent. Maybe we're gonna have to start paying electric and gas, and then, but it's also putting a struggle on a person who's not used to that. So
Yeah.
you're not getting them into, cause some people just know that you pay your rent and
That's it,
everything is
that's what it is.
included. So under this new mold, you also leaving people susceptible, because then they're gonna need training and learning how to do this all over
And
again.
more money.
So, exactly, they say that they're doing this conversion because they're opening up where NYCHA is the authority.
Mhm.
And they have no one that governs them really,
Other than.
so versus.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
That's
But under the Section 8, they can access
Funding.
grants, funding, and different resources wherein NYCHA as an authority can't do so. Now, under the trust, one of the biggest complaints there is now you're taking basically a mortgage out on the property.
Right,
So what happens if you default?
right.
And,
Yeah.
And they
Who's-
still
yeah.
cannot answer that
Yeah,
question.
who's
Right.
and here's another layer
Does
of
it go back to
complexity.
the city and they govern it
Well,
again and then?
No,
It
it doesn't,
doesn't.
because guess what?
It doesn't.
It's over it.
Yeah.
Once you get rid of all of Section 9, it's no going back.
If
So
I could
they
just-
are now realtors. You understand,
Yeah, I do.
landowners,
I
cause
do.
it's not the buildings, it's the land that NYCHA is saying.
And
That's what they
You
want.
understand? So,
Yeah, they're basically essentially renting out the land.
So
Yeah.
to your point too, Claudia, there's two other issues that people aren't talking about when it comes to the trust. The first is, it's Section 8. What's one of the requirements for Section 8? Passing inspection.
mhm.
How many, your development better than anyone else. How many of those units gonna pass inspection?
That's
too
another
many.
thing too. I'm gonna stop that, okay? When you see these apartments on TV, every single apartment is not like that.
They give you worse
Every
things.
single apartment, they wouldn't
show
need
you
you
a horror
to
story.
believe you,
Yeah.
to believe that it's that. So I could show you the yin to the yang in every development. You know, we do have our bad apples or whatever, that, you know, it's happening. That nature allows that to happen, but that is not the majority of the apartment.
I wanna,
They're sustainable.
I wanna piggyback on that comment, I think, because it would almost seem advantageous to them to show it and make it like, oh, that's a tenant problem. Look what they let their apartments turn into, as opposed to
Mhm.
the smaller subtle issues that are like, no, you're just not managing your property correctly. So let me show you a nightmare
But
story
it
and
doesn't
blame
have
it
to
on the
be
person
unit.
living there.
It could be like the boiler, it could cause an entire building to
That's
not
true,
pass
too.
inspection.
Absolutely.
So that like, it puts the building at risk. The
Mhm.
second part is, to your point, the way that the legislation was written, it doesn't say that the city or state must jump in. It's they can, or they should, you know, it's not mandatory. So they can choose to wash their hands of it
Mhm.
and leave it up to the banks.
That's right.
And that's what's going to happen, if that happens, but you know.
That's what they planning on happening.
Yeah.
What's the goal?
The goal is affordable
Right.
housing, you know, public housing is the last of affordable housing.
We should be on top of that.
We just have to look for better strategies and ways, because my thing is this. We are so conditioned to say, no, 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 no. What is it that you will accept? What is acceptable? What is cause NYCHA gives you this, right? And we go through it and we say, well, no, that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work, that's not gonna work. So it's up to us to start giving them the plan instead of us always asking them to come up with a plan.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at.
All right, so I think, look, we need to identify clear goals here, right? So, I think. Because we even brought
You
up,
can
I
have
think,
subcommittees just with.
yeah, that's gonna get confusing. I know.
Nah.
We even brought up, yeah, go ahead.
We also thought about reaching out to all the CBOs that are housed in all these nitrogen facilities, also to get them, their tenants as well.
But what, I guess my question, I
Right,
hear you.
how are conditions being responded?
Right, so what is I think our goal is, could we say our overarching goal is to
That's a lot of money.
make the conditions better, right? Identify what the conditions are, that's one goal. The other goal is finding out how these programs are gonna work and sustain themselves long-term, what's gonna happen
And how we
to the project, to the certain properties that don't fit that mold, that aren't gonna be absorbed. So I think ultimately, the goal is to understand the situation and figure out how we can advocate for there being a better quality of life in these properties and making them sustainable. I mean, I know, like, if you go to Chicago, I think all the public housing, they just demolished it, right? So that it's not just about, it's about preserving, it's about fixing and preserving. The problem is, if we can't figure out meaningful ways to fix it that are realistic, then how do you preserve it either, right? So I think that's the goal, is to understand these new programs. PACT, RAD, Trust is really new, it's just going there. It's getting a better understanding of all of those, understanding what the goal is, and then what are the conditions, right? There could be macro and micro. I mean, it could be something as simple as we toured this building this week. These are the problems, the boiler wasn't working, whatever, how do we get that fixed? You know, small wins too. It's hard to call it a goal. I think it's just, we need to have an active committee on this. We need to be walking through properties. This is the other problem. When we get too big on it, it's overwhelming, right? It's like anything else. It's this, it's like, no, why don't we just say, all right, you know, this Tuesday, we're all meeting, and we're walking this property, and we're gonna go in, we're gonna look at the common areas. Maybe there's a few people there who are letting us walk in and see their problems, and we start like that, and we just start knocking them off one at a time and making noise about it.
You know, it's almost like maybe we really need to concentrate, like, the facilities and conditions are what they are, right? Those
That's
things
true.
don't change as quick,
No,
but these programs are coming. And for me, even just sitting in this committee twice now, and just hearing what different programs, and people gonna be confused. Is this program really this or that, or I'm getting mixed up between that program and I'm thinking.
it's confusing.
Right, but then
Intentional.
what happens is, that's exactly what NYCHA wants.
It's intentionally
Because
confusing. Yeah.
then we're uneducated, and then people can't make sound decisions based on facts. they're being making decisions based on where they're being led, right, or fear. Because again, Brad, this, that, I mean, how many different things?
There's too many.
Right,
Infill.
but that's intentional. I think.
Infill is another one, Brandon, we talked about, I think
Right.
Jason brought up infill at the last meeting, and I talked to Angel about it, it's with the city of Yes, right, and all that. And it was like, okay, well, they're gonna sell the air rights, or they're gonna do this, and they don't have to necessarily build there, but they might, but where is that money going, right?
But this is the.
But that was exempt.
But this is a
Niger
thing.
property, for example.
That's what it is.
Yes, they were.
They were
all
It's supposed to be
exposed.
City of Yes.
Supposed to
I
be
thought they were
the
part of the
contract.
city of Yes, no?
No,
There's another point.
yeah, they said exempt.
Can we form the committee? Cause I think that's the next step.
Well, I was trying to get them to understand what they'd be doing, but yeah, all right, so who wants to be on that committee?
But it's the contractors too, it's the money where they putting who they actually getting, it's like, I'm gonna get a contractor, let's just say.
I understand,
It's a
but
lot of money.
I-
This is where the
I can
money
sit here all night, but
Yeah,
I can sit
Me,
here all night,
Candy,
okay.
and,
you got.
The three of you?
residents
yeah,
over
wait till
here.
it.
Okay, so, yeah.
Okay, so four, so David, Cynthia,
Um,
Claudia, and Candy, okay?
But, you wanna be part of that?
Is that the same committee or this is different?
This is Nitro
We have two
overview.
now, so just to sum it up.
Okay, we don't have a pretty name for it, it's just Nitro overview and then.
Nitro overview, and the other one's the land property.
I'm gonna sub on that committee.
Contractors.
You wanna be on the
I
night?
sub on that committee,
Yeah.
cause I'm on this committee, but and I'm gonna sub with.
What I'll do is, I'm gonna have the lists, and I'll let them know, if anybody wants to change, I'm happy to change.
I'll
I
do
just,
this.
look, I'm not gonna get hung up on, oh, we don't have a clear goal at this second. This is more than's been happening, and everybody's energetic. All right, please, too many voices. We have two committees. One of the tasks of those committees is going to be shaping exactly what we're doing. We're not gonna be able to sit here. This is the other problem. I don't wanna come in here and tell you what the whole goal is. That's not the point. The point is for the goals to come out of the work that we're doing. So we made the two committees. They seem a little broad right now, but I think as we work through them, we will realize they will become more focused, right? NYCHA will start picking the things it wants to be in. The other one will start figuring out good landlords, bad landlords, and then we'll make connections. We already made one tonight with Stephanie. Good landlords are important to bring in. They can tell us what are the things they're doing that are working, and maybe they had those problems at one time, all right? Will, and then Beverly, and then we're gonna move
I just
to
wanna make sure that I got all the names, I got Candy, I got Dave, I got Cynthia, I got Claudia. And Loretta.
Oh, no.
Yes.
You
Oh, you want
to
to go over to- okay, so Loretta is now on NYCHA and you want off the other committee, right? You're gonna do one committee, okay. And then we have Claudia and Christina are gonna be subs for each other.
Right, and if they decide that they wanna switch, they can.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Alright,
All right, that's a good start. Okay, so I think that Beverly,
And
sorry.
regarding, before you get off on night
Yeah.
shift, what other options do they have? Because I've been hearing, things about, tenant management.
Resident management.
Wait, I don't
That might be a subcommittee.
I don't wanna
Yeah,
get
that's
in,
a subcommittee
I don't wanna get into more specifics tonight. What I will say, I think, is that we're gonna have, I'm gonna start well, if you could send me the groups, just, it's hard for me to take the notes and
yep,
talk.
I got you.
I will start a threaded email with each one, right? What I'll do first is I'll send an email to everybody. These are the committee you're on, the subcommittee. Do you wanna be on that? You could be on it for 6 months, we can change, right? We're not glued to something, and then we can start the discussions. Then, everyone in that group will have a real passion for that, so we won't be having people going, oh, what's next, this, and that, we'll just be focused on that, okay? And you can send those emails at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, whatever, and we'll hone it in. I think it'll make a lot more sense as we work through it, all right? So I think that's a good starting place. I was gonna give more, but that already seems now like it's too much, right? And I just mean too much in terms of too much to handle effectively, right?
That will also help us with the budget and district needs.
I agree, because that's where we're gonna identify where that money needs to go. And that's a perfect segue into number 6. All right,
Because I'm looking at the.
So, all right. I mean, without anything that was already said, I think, arrived on a pretty finalized document last time. Jason had suggested number 4, which was new. Which was the legal representation for tenants. The city should increase funding for group resident, representation of tenants. We had moved some stuff around in that, middle place. Nothing, I think 1 or 2 things were taken off. We'd all agreed they had been accomplished, but for the most part, everything stayed. And then Will had suggested
Number 9.
the number 9,
Yeah.
other domestic violence
Yes.
service requests, HRA, and I think he put together a very well thought out explanation, explaining exactly what we're asking for. I thought it was amazing that this hadn't already been on this document. I think it's massively important, and I think it's great that we have that on here now. And maybe we get traction here and then maybe number 9 goes up and, I'm hoping none of these have to be on there again, but that's wishful thinking. Is there we're gonna vote on this as it is, unless I see any, people want to make any suggestions or changes. But we literally agreed to this and then Will added language to number 9. So unless you have a problem with Will's language, I don't think there's a problem. So do I have a motion then to adopt? Okay, well, that's why I asked. Make it really pertinent. I don't want to get it.
No,
Okay.
but we want the subject of NYCHA, right?
Yes.
So I don't see anything here that would include anything that has to do with NYCHA.
Fine.
Legal resident-
Yeah,
Yeah, 4 as well.
Oh, yeah, 4, yeah.
4 as well.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 5 is NYCHA, 4, yeah.
4 and 5.
And it's been very important, things I will say.
And 9.
And number 9.
And here's where we'll go back to. We do have them on here. And now we just said that the work we're gonna do for the next year is going to get us to have more and then more specific, so we can ask it the right way, right? So we can get, this is where the funding is, this is how it's gotten, this is who we ask, and we ask in a very direct way. This can be longer if it needs to be, if it makes it more effective, but
But I didn't argue number 1 and the expenses also.
But
Yeah.
I wanna say number 5, can I go back to number 5?
Sure.
I know that they have the agency but one of the things is that when they do the repairs, like they ran down the board.
okay, I don't wanna know the problem. What is your suggestion?
We're gonna put this here, right? And the committee will work on it, and that way we can get the wording correct.
Right, but we have to vote on this for this month.
So then what is your suggestion?
My thing is just to also put in that any funding sources that they, let me see how to put it right. So I don't get it.
And, well, no, but in the context of this, where would you, what are you putting in?
Not just the section, right? It's more, maybe because I'm looking at the way they're spending the money on repair, that they should get inspectors have enough money to come back, staff to check the work that is being done by the
But
contractor.
that's not a request that we can make on this documentation. The
They're not- they don't have
documentation,
enough funding.
no, because that's a salary, and that's different. What we're asking for here is like a bigger ask.
But don't they, I'm sorry, don't they already have supervisors who are supposed to go back and check work?
They do.
Right, so that wouldn't be a separate ask, they already
You
have
ran
that
this committee,
staff.
right?
So I never understood.
No, district need, a budget and district need.
Yeah,
You were the chair of
yeah.
that? And you're saying that that's not an ask we can make here?
What I'm saying is, when we're making these asks, you're asking for a mandate that only NYCHA can make. Am I wrong?
So
You're asking for NYCHA to make sure that the repairs, once they're done, someone is there to check them, right? You're asking for funding to be
Right.
used.
To
So
see
that's
oversee the work that was done.
Right, and like an oversight.
Right, like go
person,
after the
because
fact and make sure the work was done,
That's
correct. And
right.
is there a way to
the
ask?
problem is complaining that they don't have the budget, but they do. If they have $150 million to give for security to a firm that's supposed to be providing something for the NYCHA residents, why we don't have that?
With security, wait, now you're jumping.
Okay,
We're
I'm
talking
gonna
about
look at
repairs
that.
or security?
It's supposed to be, if they're giving money away.
What
and
is-
That's.
So what is the ask? We wanna ask
You know
them to
what, more
provide,
like, can we ask for cameras?
that's on here, that's number 3, I think, right?
I see a-
3 in capital,
No, no, no,
number
no.
3 in
With
capital.
capital.
Number 3.
That's, yeah.
Install security cameras or make other safety upgrades. Okay, I'm gonna move it for a vote. Okay,
I make a motion to adopt the budget as it is.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
I'm okay
second
with
it.
it.
all
That's
right,
fine.
so motion by Claudia, seconded by Christina. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any present not voting? Motion passes. All right, great.
No.
We're gonna go to old business, okay? And then we're pretty much done. Candy, please. All right, it's hard to. All right, so. We had a 421A resolution here. I heard, like 2 years, we talked about it last month. We had a idea that we were gonna go and kind of make edits and suggestions, and I think there was a few things, but it didn't really take shape the way I thought it should. And I thought when we talked, right, the 2 times I was in this committee, the idea was to help senior displacement, right? That was the gist of it. And so the whole 421A thing was throwing me off because, and I'll say it, like, obviously want to help everybody, but to just say we want to give the 421A relief program makes me wonder if this committee is asking to help the people who need it the most. And I looked at some of these properties, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the units in these that have expired, they're selling 2-bedroom co-ops for $700,000. Now, I'm wondering, and I didn't think those people should be at the top of the list of a resolution that this committee passes in October. So I thought about, okay, what's the real issue? 421A expired. You have seniors who maybe bought in 30 years ago. They're on a fixed income, a low fixed income. Now they have to pay property taxes. And now they're gonna be at risk of getting displaced, right? And then what happens there? They get displaced, they gotta get affordable housing now, they go into the pool, you're increasing demand for the supply. So I did research. We talked about the ski program. Now, I could be wrong, it was my belief that the easiest way to maybe do an ask or asks for something is within a program that already exists, rather than ask for something new. So ski exists, right? As it existed, and don't hold me to this exactly, it's senior housing exemption. I don't know what ski is for. Basically, senior citizen, there you go. I just leave the citizen part out. If you're a primary residence as a senior citizen of certain incomes of a 1, 2, or 3 family home, you could get a reduction on your assessed value of your property, right? So as it existed, if you were making 50,000 or less, you'd get a 50% reduction on your assessed value, which, don't hold me to it, but would essentially convert to not exactly a 50% property, like, 'cause assessed values are it's another thing that's made it confusing to just make it confusing, right? And then there was 50 to 60,000, they had like 8 scales, like 50 to 51, you get 45, this and that, and then anybody over 60 for the household got nothing, right? So I said it in my mind, and what I put on here, we keep the 50 and under, but from 50, we ask for 75%. 50 to 60 now just becomes one group. I don't think somebody with 58,000 a year needs are that different from somebody who's making 52,000. It seemed absolutely ridiculous. That is 50% now, right? So we moved the 50 to the middle, 75 is now 50 and under, and then 60 to 75, you had to cap it somewhere, but I didn't think 60 was high enough on a house. Remember, this is household income, not individual income. So 60 to 75 is 35%, right, of assessed value. So that was one of the main points of this resolution. The other one was, as I did research, I couldn't find much on the New York City comptroller really looking into these things, but the New York State comptroller, DiNapoli, does seem to be very interested in senior housing. He's identified units in HPD's possession that are specifically meant for seniors, at least 71 just in one audit, that were just sitting empty. And HPD didn't have really any feedback or answers or whatever. And there were those were just 71 for seniors specifically, empty,
Nobody's there, and that's such a need.
vacant.
Oh, not just for seniors.
No, I just said, that was just 71 senior, it is, this was all pulled from their audits. Anything I pulled was directly, it might not be the link from that, because I had too many Google pages open, but this is all from direct audits that they conducted.
Yeah.
So the ask basically of this resolution is to the to New York City Department of Finance, because they are essentially who is, running the ski program. It's state, New York State, but then I think they give the cities kind of like discretion onto how they actually roll those out, right? So the city would be who we'd say, can you change these bands? Can you give the people under 50,000 more support? And that essentially, this isn't only gonna be helping people now, it will be helping those people that are now out of 421A, but it'll be helping everybody else in every other senior too, and disabled. There's a disabled component to this too. There's the fixed income component, and then there is the senior affordable housing component, right? Which is, all right, HPD, like you have all these empty apartments, like what is your incentive to fill,
Yeah.
right? So that's the ask here. But listen, it's a one resolution. We could come back 2 months and go, wanna add something, Jason?
We move to adopt, I think this is great.
You like it? Oh, sorry. I didn't want to say that I wrote it. You know, all right.
Well, I asked for some changes.
We did.
Those are the changes?
You wanted the language
okay.
in to make it easier to read.
Gotcha.
And I wrote it.
It feels like too much.
That's literally what.
It looks like
This
too
is
much. for
literally,
me.
I said I'll take it. You said it, I said I'll take it.
Yeah, that, yeah.
All right, so Jason makes a motion to adopt the resolution, seconded by Stephanie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any not present or voting? Motion
We
carries.
now erase that off.
Okay. All right, let me just rein it back in for 2 seconds. That's it for old business. We have no new business.
I have one.
We do have new business.
Sorry, so in the spirit of tenancy issues that, we were discussing, last Saturday, 1199 Houses held a meeting, which I attended for their tenants. There's a proposal about moving them out of Mitchell-Lama into another housing program, so out of section 2 to section 8, like there's a whole, like, this thing that's going on. I think it bears asking questions about it. I know that there were a lot of questions it was a very tense meeting.
Was it Mitchell Lama, they're coming out of these buildings? So I know in the last
Some.
couple of years, they were letting go some of their
They
buildings.
get sticky vouchers and they become money.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's the kind of thing that, because it's happening in such high numbers across the city, where, it seems like the only way that Mitchell Lamas get saved is if they're in affluent neighborhoods. I think it just bears investigating by this committee.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes, it does.
so I'll tell you what, and then I'll call on you. I know we were supposed to meet, let's sit down together, let's
Yeah.
meet, and I'll say, anytime you know of these things, I'm happy to tag along in here. But let's sit, and maybe me and you can figure out exactly how we bring this in as something, I like that. All right, and then I'm gonna go Candy, Stephanie, and then I think, we'll do roll call and call it a night, all right?
Yeah, really cool. I want to see that big-
Wanna make it even time for the debate?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
I asked them to make the debate at 9 for us.
I'll make
so
it
we're gonna
quick.
make a phone call.
The thing is that I'm glad you're bringing that up because the Mitchell, 1199 is a co-op just the same way it's a rental. And if that happens at 1199, that can trickle down to, also, Franklin Plaza. Lakeview again, it was always on the spotlight fighting,
Yeah.
tooth and nail that they gave us the eye opening. So, yeah.
All right, well, you're welcome to come sit down with us, maybe we'll have lunch together, the three of us, all right?
Well, I just have two
And then
questions.
Angel.
I just have two questions on regards of 1199 and Franklin Plaza, which was my earlier question and I didn't get to it with the subcommittees. Would that be within the subsidized
Probably.
housing or?
I think that would be property overview.
Yeah.
That-
Property
that
overview?
would take anything that's not NYCHA, had racked.
Gotcha. All right, and then my second, not so much a question, but more of a comment. I think Candy, what you were thinking was maybe like asking NYCHA to like earmark funding, so there's like an oversight for repair. But speaking of, Angel and cause I know, like, that's not something that we can do on the expense, but that is something that when we bring management here, which is your subcommittee that you're working on, you could say, hey, how can we make sure this happens? And then once we have more information, if it is something that we can put in our district needs, then we can definitely go back to that, because we're still doing FY 26, so.
You know what they're gonna tell them? That's what the monitorship is for.
But then we bring the
All right,
monitors.
Candy, all right, Angel,
I'll give you the information, we bring the monitors in.
all right.
So,
Oh,
just
we are, like,
two quick things. One on NYCHA, in all my time here, that's a nuclear bomb every time you say NYCHA. So respectfully, if you're gonna talk about NYCHA and you actually want to achieve something, building your own knowledge base, getting a better understanding, you need to be very organized. Otherwise, you're just gonna be hearing or for months and years and nothing's gonna happen. The people at NYCHA, I've been to a lot of these meetings and they have more than enough reason to be pissed off. And they've been pissed off for many years. They're still pissed off. They're gonna keep being pissed off. And if you're gonna insist on going into their space to ask them questions without delivering something, they're gonna be pissed off at you.
Yeah.
So organize and expect something realistic from yourselves. And then see from that point, how you can try to be helped. So that it's a good use of your time versus just getting yelled at. Like I've been there a million times. The other thing with 1199 to consider for those of you that are gonna be working on it, 1199 for many years has had a governance problem. Right? So it isn't someone from the outside messing with them, it's them having difficulty minding their own house. And as much as we wanna root for our neighbors, sometimes our neighbors get themselves in a pickle. So we need to understand what's going on, try to be helpful in any way that we can, but we might have to have hard conversations, or at least, be prepared to be kind of surprised with our neighbor that doesn't know how the hell to do what they're supposed to be doing. Like, it's a challenge, right? To go from, I'm a renter to now I'm an owner. I had someone I knew, I'll just say that, professionally, that always referred to their monthly payment as rent. Right? You're not renting, you're paying your maintenance and that is a mindset that people have to break out of.
Yeah.
And we have to be serious with our neighbors that we care about in saying that, because you should have cleared that hurdle in the first place. And now, because now you're here and it's like, how do we fix where you are now? How do we help you fix where you are now? So that incredible opportunity, which 1199 and Franklin and the rest of these places are, doesn't end up at risk or being lost, right? If they go Section 8, that's a whole bunch of homeownership gone, right? And that would be too bad. So just something to, as we're looking into things about people that we care about, sometimes people we care about do stuff in that boat. And we kind of have to like have the hard conversation, or, at least realize for ourselves that, maybe Adam doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Or Angel doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and we have to be like, Angel, man, get it together, right? Or like, hey, have you looked at this? That's all.
To that point, they're in a huge financial mess right now. We're talking millions of dollars in arrears for maintenance. Yeah, which is why this is even in the conversation, so there is precedence in terms of this conversion, this type of conversion. Another Michelama did a different type of conversion where it preserved homeownership, just a different program. That's also on the table. But the scariest problem would be exactly what Angel said, that we lose homeownership opportunity, one of the few homeownership opportunities for, people in this community because of lack of knowledge, lack of,
Or updating their knowledge too, because it's from who started it. It's like the SIL program converting them into the HDSC. They already knew they had the governance, they had everything in place, and then all of a sudden, once you become the HDSC, HPD goes away, you could say, no supervision, you gotta continue that. And that's where you was supposed to be the oversight to make sure that all of that was still continuing. Now, the president stays president forever because somebody else don't want to take over. But then let's say that person passes away, all that information is there, the shareholders, sometimes the children inherit it, and they don't even realize what it means to be a shareholder, because nobody's giving them that education.
Okay, look, what I will, we're gonna do roll call, and I'll end it on this note.
Chair, can I make a comment, Chair? I'm not on your committee, but I was just filling in, listening. I was surprised, man. This committee, looks like it's been in effect for a long time. Just want to congratulate everyone on the committee.
It's like I paid you to
I
come
wouldn't
on.
believe, and I was just curious, so I joined in. But I wouldn't believe that considerably like last year, this committee hardly met. You even have cool David Giordano hiding in the background. I barely saw him. But anyway, I just want to congratulate everyone on their work because
Thank you.
you guys been working hard.
Thank you. And I'll just say this, like I said, it was important to make the committees, make the goals. We don't want to sit here for 4 hours. People have passions for certain things. I'm not saying, we all care about it all. We have passion. We will iron all that out and flesh it out, and then we'll have more narrow directives going forward, right? With that said, you can take the roll.
Stephanie Arroyo,
President.
Ben Brija,
Present.
Jocelyn Cruz, David Giordano,
President.
John Green,
I wanted to go
Christina
there.
Johnson,
President.
Wilfredo Lopez,
Present.
Jessica Morris, Beverly Pavone,
President.
Claudia Perez,
President.
Cynthia Ramos, Dawn Sanders,
Here.
Loretta So, Candy Vasquez,
Yeah.
Jason Wu.
President.
Yeah.
Meeting's adjourned.
Great job, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.